Hello everybody, and welcome. We are currently reading Puck of Pook's Hill by Rudyard Kipling, written in 1900 something, I think. You can look that one up. Wikipedia or Google are your friends. I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories, and currently we're reading Puck of Pook's Hill. We are probably about 2/3 of the way through the book. There is a sequel to it called Rewards and Fairies, which we won't be reading immediately after this book. We will read something else and then come back to it, just because it keeps the stories a bit fresher. Sometimes if you have too long on one book, it gets a little bit same. It's like having the same dinner every night for several weeks. Just not as much fun as what it is when it's a special thing. Anyway, so I read stories from another era, other eras, and other places, mainly at the moment Old English ones from the Victorian and Edwardian eras, just because, well, actually they're in public domain, most of them now, but also because it's really nice when there's so much going on in the world at the moment that is contentious to actually set your mind into another place and think about other things and see the world in a different way. And it helps us to just relax, chill, and be somewhere else for a while. And it's actually good for your mind and your body to do that from time to time. So that's it. If you liked having having stories read to you at bedtime when you're a kid, this is the sort of thing. Just think of it as being like that. It doesn't have to be for children. This is for adults as well. But the stories I read are initially written aimed at children, not necessarily really little children, and there are sometimes some concepts that are not really in line with how we see the world these days and the attitudes that we see, but that's the way they were in the time that these stories were written, so I will be reading them as they were written. There are occasionally words or phrases or concepts that I'm very familiar with that I know that most listeners may not be, because I grew up listening to stories that my parents and my grandparents had grown up with. So I have a fairly old understanding of what the world used to be like in terms of words used and what different things meant. So I will interrupt myself from time to time when I'm reading to explain something. If I think a story is going to explain it, I won't. I will let the story explain the situation or the word or the usage. But sometimes you'll get an author who says something that was so common in their day and age that they don't explain it for us. And so those things I will try to remember too. I don't usually stop and chat during a chapter, but at the end of a chapter, between chapters, I will chat. So if you have your drink of water handy, or whatever else it is that you're going to be drinking to keep yourself hydrated, and maybe a snack, and somewhere comfortable to sit. That's the other one. That's what you need. You meant to remind me of that, remember? Anyway, so we shall start. Puck of Pook's Hill by Rudyard Kipling, and we are reading, I'm not sure what the chapter number is, The Winged Hats. And I'm not sure about the chapter number because this book doesn't actually have them written in. I'm reading from an ebook version because I don't have a physical copy handy at the moment. Anyway, chapter whatever, The Winged Hats. The next day happened to be what they called a wild afternoon. Father and Mother went out to pay calls. Miss Blake went for a ride on her bicycle, and they were left all alone till 8 o'clock. When they had seen their dear parents and their dear preceptress politely off the premises, their tutor, their governess, whatever it was she was teaching them, politely off the premises, they got a cabbage leaf full of raspberries from the gardener and a wild tea from Ellen. That's the cook, maybe, or the housekeeper, someone like that. They ate the raspberries to prevent their squashing, and they meant to divide the cabbage leaf with 3 cows down at the theatre. But they came across a dead hedgehog which they simply had to bury, and the leaf was too useful to waste. Then they went on to the forge and found old Hobden, the hedger, at home with his son, the bee boy, who is not quite right in the head, but who can pick up swarms of bees in his naked hands, and the bee boy told them the rhyme about the slow worm. If I had eyes as I could see, no mortal man would trouble me. They all had tea together by the hives, and Hobden said the loaf cake which Ellen had given them was almost as good as what his wife used to make, and he showed them how to set a wire at the right height for hares, for trapping them, because they can be a problem on the pastures. They knew about rabbits already. Then they climbed up Long Ditch into the lower end of Far Wood. This is sadder and darker than the Volaterrae end because of an old marl pit full of black water where weepy hairy moss hangs round the stumps of the willows and alders. But the birds come to perch on the dead branches, and Hobden says that the bitter willow water is a sort of medicine for sick animals. Did you know that aspirin was originally from willow bark or willow water? So that doesn't actually sound quite so strange when you understand that that's how it used to be. They sat down in a field on a felled oak trunk in the shadows of the beech undergrowth and were looping the wires Hobden had given them when they saw Parnesius. Remember Parnesius, the Roman? "How quietly you came," said Una, moving up to make room. "Where's Puck?" "The fawn and I have disputed whether it is better that I should tell you all my tale or leave it untold," he replied. "I only said that if he told it as it happened, you wouldn't understand it," said Puck, jumping up like a squirrel from behind the log. "I don't understand all of it," said Una, "but I like hearing about the little Picts." "What I can't understand," said Dan, "is how Maximus knew all about the Picts when he was over in Gaul." "He who makes himself emperor anywhere must know everything everywhere," said Parnesius. "We had this much from Maximus's mouth after the games." "Games? What games?" said Dan. Parnesius stretched his arm out stiffly, thumb pointed to the ground. "Gladiators, that sort of game," he said. There were 2 days' games in his honour when he landed all unexpected at Segdunum on the east end of the wall. Segdunum. "Yes, the day after we had met him we held 2 days' games, but I think the greatest risk was run not by the poor wretches on the sand, but by Maximus. In the old days the legions kept silence before their emperor. So did we. You could hear the solid roar run west along the wall as his chair was carried rocking through the crowds. The garrison beat round him, clamouring, clowning, asking for pay, for change of quarters, for anything that came into their wild heads. That chair was like a little boat among the waves, dipping and falling, but always rising again after one had shut the eyes." Parnesius shivered. "Were they angry with him?" said Dan. "No more angry than wolves in a cage when their trainer walks amongst them. If he had turned his back an instant, or for an instant had ceased to hold their eyes, there would have been another emperor made on the wall that hour. Was it not so, Fawn?" "So it was, so it always will be," said Puck. Late in the evening his messenger came for us, and we followed to the Temple of Victory, where he lodged with Rutilianus, the general of the wall. I had hardly seen the general before, but he always gave me leave when I wished to take heather. That's when they're going over to the wild side of the wall to go hunting, which was in our previous chapters. He was a great glutton and kept 5 Asian cooks, and he came of a family that believed in oracles. We could smell his good dinner when we entered, but the tables were empty. He lay snoring on a couch. Maximus sat apart among long rolls of accounts. Then the doors were shut. "These are your men," said Maximus to the general, who propped his eye corners open with his gouty fingers and stared at us like a fish. "I shall know them again, Caesar," said Rutilianus. "Very good," said Maximus. "Now here, you are not to move man or shield on the wall except as these boys shall tell you. You will do nothing except eat without their permission. They are the head and arms, you are the belly." "As Caesar pleases," the old man grunted. "If my pay and profits are not cut, you may make my ancestors' oracle my master. Rome has been, Rome has been." Then he turned on his side to sleep. "He has it," said Maximus. "We will get to what I need." He unrolled full copies of the number of men and supplies on the wall, down to the sick, that very day, in Huno Hospital. Oh, but I groaned when his pen marked off detachment after detachment of our best, of our least worthless men. He took 2 towers of our Scythians, 2 of our North British auxiliaries, 2 Numidian cohorts, the Dacians all, and half the Belgians. It was like an eagle pecking a carcass. Remember, Maximus is wanting troops to aid him over in Gaul as he makes himself emperor of a larger and larger territory. And now, how many catapults have you? He turned up a new list, but Pertinax laid his open hand there. No, Caesar, said he, do not tempt the gods too far. Take men or engines, but not both, else we refuse. Engines, said Una. The catapults of the wall, huge things, 40 feet high to the head, firing nets of raw stone or forged bolts. Nothing can stand against them. He left us our catapults at last, but he took a Caesar's half of our men without pity. We were a shell when he rolled up the lists. The forged bolts are probably like crossbow bolts, not nuts and bolts. You can, with the right sort of siege machine, you can fire a whole lot of shooting, like arrows, bolts at something, and they're quite scary and do a lot of damage. So that would be probably what they are. We were a shell when he rolled up the lists. Hail Caesar, we about to die salute you, said Pertinax, laughing. If any enemy even leans against the wall now, it will tumble. Give me the 3 years Allo spoke of, he answered, and you shall have 20,000 men of your own choosing here. But now it is a gamble, a game played against the gods, and the stakes are Britain, Gaul, and perhaps Rome. You play on my side? We will play, Caesar, I said, for I had never met a man like this man. Good. Tomorrow, said he, I proclaim you captains of the wall before the troops. That's why he was telling the general that they were to be obeyed for anything that they said, because they're a lot more strategic, they understand, and also they have a good working relationship with some of the people on the other side of the wall to be able to keep a balance. That's probably a big part of it. Anyway, so we went into the moonlight where they were cleaning the ground after the games. We saw great Romadea atop of the wall, the frost on her helmet, and her spear pointed towards the North Star. I'm guessing that they're meaning a statue. We saw the twinkle of night fires all along the guard towers and the line of the black catapults growing smaller and smaller in the distance. All these things we knew till we were weary, but that night they seemed very strange to us because the next day we knew we were to be their masters. The men took the news well, but when Maximus went away with half our strength, and we had to spread ourselves into the emptied towers, and the townspeople complained that trade would be ruined, and the autumn gales blew. Remember, this is kind of between Scotland and England. It's actually in England, but it formed the geographical barrier that they were able to enforce. So, yeah, the autumn gales are going to be rather uncomfortable. It was dark, and the autumn gales blew. It was dark days for us two people. Here Pertinax was more than my right hand. Being born and bred among the great country houses in Gaul, he knew the proper words to address to all, from Roman-born centurions to those dogs of the third, the Libyans, and he spoke to each as though that man were as high-minded as himself. Now I saw so strongly what things were needed to be done, that I forgot things are only accomplished by means of men. That was a mistake. I feared nothing from the Picts, at least for that year, but Allo warned me that the winged hats would soon come in from the sea at each end of the wall to prove to the Picts how weak we were. So I made ready in haste, and none too soon. I shifted our best men to the ends of the wall and set up screened catapults by the beach. The winged hats would drive in before the snow squalls, 10 or 20 boats at a time, on Segedinum or Ituna, according as the winds blew. whichever end of the wall was appropriate for their boats to get to. Now a ship coming in to land men must furl her sail. If you wait till you see her men gather up the sail's foot, your catapults can jerk a net of loose stones, bolts only cut through the cloth, into the bag of it, the sail. Then she turns over, and the sea makes everything clean again. A few men may come ashore, but very few. It was not hard to work except the waiting on the beach in blowing sand and snow, and that was how we dealt with the winged hats that winter. It's a fairly strategic way of doing it. Makes sense. Early in the spring, when the east winds blow like skinning knives, they gathered again off Segedunum with many ships. Allo told me they would never rest till they had taken a tower in open fight. Certainly they fought in the open. We dealt with them thoroughly through a long day, and when all was finished, one man dived clear of the wreckage of his ship and swam towards shore. I waited, and a wave tumbled him at my feet. As I stooped, I saw he wore such a medal as I wear. Panesius raised his hand to his neck. Therefore, when he could speak, I addressed him a certain question, which can only be answered in a certain manner. He answered with the necessary word, the word that belongs to the degree of griffins, in the science of Mithras, my god. I put my shield over him till he could stand up. You see, I am not short, but he was a head taller than I. He said, "What now?" I said, "At your pleasure, my brother, to stay or go." He looked out across the surf. There remained one ship unhurt, beyond range of our catapults. I checked the catapults, and he waved her in. I checked, as in told them to stop. She came as a hound comes to a master. When she was as yet 100 paces from the beach, he flung back his hair and swam out. They hauled him in and went away. I knew that those who worship Mithras are many and of all races, so I did not think much more upon the matter. A month later I saw Allo with his horses by the temple of Pan, O Faun, and he gave me a great necklace of gold studded with coral. At first I thought it was a bribe from some tradesman in the town meant for old Rutilianus. I have a hard time with that one. Rutilianus. Nay, said Allo, this is a gift from Amal, that winged hat, whom you saved on the beach. He says you are a man. He is a man too. Can tell him I can wear his gift, I answered. Oh, Amal is a young fool, but speaking as sensible men, your emperor is doing such great things in Gaul that the winged hats are anxious to be his friends, or better still, the friends of his servants. They think you and Pertinax could lead them to victories. That's the message. Allo looked at me like a one-eyed raven. Allo, I said, you are the corn between the two millstones. Be content if they grind evenly, and don't thrust your hand between them. I, said Allo, I hate Rome and the winged hats equally, but if the winged hats thought that some day you and Pertinax might join them against Maximus, they would leave you in peace while you considered. Time is what we need, you and I and Maximus. Let me carry a pleasant message back to the winged hats, something for them to make a council over. We barbarians are all alike. We sit up half the night to discuss anything a Roman says. Eh? We have no men. We must fight with words, said Pertinax. Leave it to Allo and me. So Allo carried word back to the winged hats that we would not fight them if they did not fight us, and they, I think they were a little tired of losing men in the sea, agreed to a sort of truce. I believe Allo, who being a horse dealer loved lies, also told them that we might some day rise against Maximus, as Maximus has risen against Rome. Hinted at it, maybe. Indeed, they permitted the corn ships which I sent to the Picts to pass north that season without harm. Therefore the Picts were well fed that winter, and since they were in some sort my children, I was glad of it. We had only 2,000 men on the wall, and I wrote many times to Maximus and begged, prayed him to send me only one cohort of my old North British troops. He could not spare them. He needed them to win more victories in Gaul. Then came news that he had defeated and slain the Emperor Gratian, and thinking he must now be secure, I wrote again for men. He answered, you will learn that I have at last settled accounts with the pup Gratian. There was no need that he should have died, but he became confused and lost his head, which is a bad thing to befall any emperor. Tell your father I am content to drive 2 mules only, for unless my old general's son thinks himself destined to destroy me, I shall rest Emperor of Gaul and Britain, and then you, my 2 children, will presently get all the men you need. Just now I can spare none. So he's not trying to be Emperor of Rome, he's just trying to be Emperor of Gaul and Britain, not spreading himself too thinly. What did he mean by his general's son? Said Dan. He meant Theodosius, Emperor of Rome, who was the son of Theodosius the general, under whom Maximus had fought in the old Pict War. The 2 men never loved each other, and when Gratian made the younger Theodosius Emperor of the East, at least so I've heard, Maximus carried on the war to the 2nd generation. It was his fate, and it was his fall. But Theodosius the Emperor is a good man, as I know. Panesius was silent for a moment, then continued. I wrote back to Maximus that, though we had peace on the wall, I should be happier with a few more men and some new catapults. He answered, You must live a little longer under the shadow of my victories, till I can see what young Theodosius intends. He may welcome me as a brother emperor, or he may be preparing an army. In either case I cannot spare men just now. But he was always saying that, cried Una. It was true, he did not make excuses, but thanks, as he said, to the news of his victories, we had no trouble on the wall for a long, long time. The Picts grew fatter as their own sheep among the heather, and as many of my men as lived there well exercised in their weapons. Yes, the wall looked strong. For myself, I knew how weak we were. I knew that if even a false rumour of any defeat to Maximus broke loose among the winged hats, they might come down in earnest. And then the wall must go. For the Picts I never cared, but in those years I learned something of the strength of the winged hats. They increased their strength every day, but I could not increase my men. Maximus had emptied Britain behind us, and I felt myself to be a man with a rotten stick standing before a broken fence to turn bulls. Thus, my friends, we lived on the wall, waiting for the men that Maximus never sent. Presently he wrote that he was preparing an army against Theodosius. He wrote, and Pertinax read it over my shoulder in our quarters, Tell your father that my destiny orders me to drive 3 mules or be torn in pieces by them, 3 mules being 3 territories to rule. I hope within a year to finish with Theodosius, son of Theodosius, once and for all. Then you shall have Britain to rule, and Pertinax, if he chooses, Gaul. Today, I think this is a carrot. He's holding out a carrot before the donkey. Today I wish strongly you were with me to beat my auxiliaries into shape. Do not, I pray you, believe any rumour of my sickness. I have a little evil in my old body, which I shall cure by riding swiftly into Rome. That's not sounding so good. Said Pertinax, It is finished with Maximus. He writes as a man without hope. I, a man without hope, can see this. What does he add at the bottom of the roll? Tell Pertinax I have met his late uncle, the duumvir of Divio, and that he accounted to me quite truthfully for all his mother's moneys. I have sent her with a fitting escort, for she is the mother of a hero, to Nicaea, where the climate is warm. That is proof, said Pertinax. Nicaea is not far by sea from Rome. A woman there could take ship and fly to Rome in time of war. Yes, Maximus foresees his death and is fulfilling his promises one by one. But I am glad my uncle met him. You think blackly today? I asked. I think truth. The gods weary of the play we have played against them. Theodosius will destroy Maximus. It is finished. Will you write him that? I said. See what I shall write, he answered, and he took pen and wrote a letter cheerful as the light of day, tender as a woman's, and full of jests. Even I, reading over his shoulder, took comfort from it till I saw his face. And now, he said, sealing it, we be 2 dead men, my brother. Let us go to the temple. We prayed a while to Mithras, where we had many times prayed before. After that, we lived day by day among evil rumours till winter came again. And now, It happened one morning that we rowed to the east shore and found on the beach a fair-haired man, half frozen, bound to some broken planks. Turning him over, we saw by his belt buckle that he was a Goth of an Eastern legion. Suddenly he opened his eyes and cried loudly, "He is dead! The letters were with me, but the winged hats sank the ship." So saying, he died between our hands. We asked not who was dead. We knew. We raced before the driving snow to Huno, thinking perhaps Allo might be there. We found him already at our stables, and he saw by our faces what we had heard. "It was in a tent by the sea," he stammered. "He was beheaded by Theodosius. He sent a letter to you written while he waited to be slain. The winged hats met the ship and took it. The news is running through the heather like fire. Blame me not. I cannot hold back my young men any more." "I would we could say as much for our men," said Pertinax, laughing, "but God's be praised, they cannot run away." "What do you do?" said Allo. "I bring an order, a message from the winged hats that you join them with your men and march south to plunder Britain." "It grieves me," said Pertinax, "but we are stationed here to stop that thing." "If I carry back such an answer, they will kill me," said Allo. "I always promised the winged hats that you would rise when Maximus fell. I did not think he could fall." "Alas, my poor barbarian," said Pertinax, still laughing. "Well, you have sold us too many good ponies to be thrown back to your friends. We will make you a prisoner, although you are an ambassador." "Yes, that will be best," said Allo, holding out a halter. We bound him lightly, for he was an old man. So if they treat him as a prisoner, make the others think he is a prisoner, then the others can't blame Allo for the fact that the Romans are not doing what he had promised they would. Presently the winged hats came to look for, presently the winged hats, this is the Northmen, remember, may come to look for you, and that will give us more time. See how the habit of playing for time sticks to a man, said Pertinax, as he tied the rope. No, I said, time may help. If Maximus wrote us a letter while he was a prisoner, Theodosius must have sent the ship that brought it. If he can send ships, he can send men. How will that profit us, said Pertinax. We serve Maximus, not Theodosius. Even if by some miracle of the gods Theodosius down south sent and saved the wall, we could not expect more than the death Maximus died. It concerns us to defend the wall, no matter what emperor dies or makes die, I said. Good point. That is worthy of your brother the philosopher, said Pertinax. Myself I am without hope, so I do not say solemn and stupid things. Rouse the wall. We armed the wall from end to end. We told the officers that there was a rumour of Maximus's death, which might bring down the winged hats, but we were sure, even if it were true, that Theodosius, for the sake of Britain, would send us help. Therefore we must stand fast. My friends, it is above all things strange to see how men bear ill news. Often the strongest till then become the weakest, while the weakest, as it were, reach up and steal strength from the gods. So it was with us, yet my Pertinax, by his jests and his courtesy and his labours, had put heart and training into our poor numbers during the past years, more than I should have thought possible. Even our Libyan cohort, the third, stood up in their padded cuirasses and did not whimper. In 3 days came 7 chiefs and elders of the winged hats. Among them was that tall young man Amal, whom I had met on the beach, and he smiled when he saw my necklace. We made them welcome, for they were ambassadors. We showed them Allo, alive but bound. They thought we had killed him. And I saw it would not have vexed them if we had. So that's not very much hope for Allo if they release him, is it? Allo saw it too, and it vexed him. Then in our quarters at Huno we came to council. They said that Rome was falling and that we must join them. They offered me all South Britain to govern after they had taken a tribute out of it. I answered, patience. This wall is not weighed off like plunder. Give me proof that my general is dead. Nay, said one elder, prove to us that he lives. And another said cunningly, what will you give us if we read you his last words? We are not merchants to bargain, cried Amal. Moreover, I owe this man my life. He shall have his proof. He threw across to me a letter. Well, I knew the seal. from Maximus. "We took this out of the ship we sank," he cried. "I cannot read, but I know one sign at least, which makes me believe." He showed me a dark stain on the outer roll that my heavy heart perceived was the valiant blood of Maximus. "Read," said Amal. "Read, and then let us hear whose servants you are." Said Pertinax very softly after he had looked through it, "I will read it all. Listen, barbarians." He read that which I have carried next to my heart ever since. Parnesius drew from his neck a folded and spotted piece of parchment and began in a hushed voice. To Parnesius and Pertinax, this is Parnesius talking to the children, drew from his neck a folded and spotted piece of parchment. That's the bit that it said just before, "I have carried it next to my heart ever since." A folded and spotted piece of parchment, and began in a hushed voice. To Parnesius and Pertinax, the not unworthy captains of the wall, from Maximus, once Emperor of Gaul and Britain, now prisoner waiting death by the sea in the camp of Theodosius, greeting and goodbye. "Enough," said young Amal. "There is your proof. You must join us now." Pertinax looked long and silently at him, till that fair man blushed like a girl. Then read Pertinax, "I have joyfully done much evil in my life to those who have wished me evil, but if ever I did any evil to you too, I repent, and I ask your forgiveness. The 3 mules which I strove to drive have torn me in pieces, as your father prophesied. The naked swords wait at the tent door to give me the death I gave to Gratian. Therefore I, your general and your emperor, send you free and honourable dismissal from my service, which you entered not for money or office, but as it makes me warm to believe, because you loved me." "By the light of the sun," Amal broke in, "this was in some sort of a man. We may have been mistaken in his servants." And Pertinax read on. "You gave me the time for which I asked. If I have failed to use it, do not lament. We have gambled very splendidly against the gods, but they hold weighted dice, and I must pay the forfeit. Remember, I have been. But Rome is, and Rome will be. Tell Pertinax his mother is in safety at Nicaea, and her moneys are in charge of the prefect at Antipolis. Make my remembrances to your father and to your mother, whose friendship was great gain to me. Give also to my little Picts and to the winged hats such messages as their thick heads can understand. I would have sent you 3 legions this very day if all had gone aright. Do not forget me. We have worked well together. Farewell, farewell, farewell." Now that was my emperor's last letter. The children heard the parchment crackle as Parnesius returned it to its place. Now, just a wee thought. If it was paper, he would not still have had it in his shirt, tucked inside his shirt against his skin, because it would have fallen to pieces. But it was parchment, which is a lot stronger and lasts a lot longer. We'll carry on. "I was mistaken," said Amal. "The servants of such a man will sell nothing except over the sword. I am glad of it." He held out his hand to me. "But Maximus has given you your dismissal," said an elder. "You are certainly free to serve or to rule whom you please. Join, do not follow. Join us." "We thank you," said Pertinax, "but Maximus tells us to give you such messages as, pardon me, but I use his words, your thick heads can understand." He pointed through the door to the foot of a catapult, wound up. "We understand," said an elder. "The wall must be won at a price?" "It grieves me," said Pertinax, laughing, "but so it must be won," and he gave them our best southern wine. They drank and wiped their yellow beards in silence till they rose to go. Said Amal, stretching himself, for they were barbarians, "We be a goodly company. I wonder what the ravens and the dogfish will make of some of us before the snow melts." Ravens are carrion eaters of the land, and dogfish probably eat rotting flesh in the sea. So he's saying there's going to be a lot of death. "I wonder what the ravens and the dogfish will make of some of us before the snow melts. Think rather what Theodosius may send." I answered, and though they laughed, I saw that my chance shot troubled them. Only old Allo lingered behind a little. You see, he said, winking and blinking, I am no more than their dog. When I have shown their men the secret short ways across our bogs, they will kick me like one. Then I should not be in haste to show them those ways, said Pertinax, till I was sure that Rome could not save the wall. You think so? Woe is me, said the old man. I only wanted peace for my people. And he went out, stumbling through the snow, behind the tall winged hats. In this fashion then, slowly, a day at a time, which is very bad for doubting troops, the war came upon us. At first the winged hats swept in from the sea as they had done before, and there we met them as before with the catapults, and they sickened of it. Yet for a long time they would not trust their duck legs on land, and I think when it came to revealing the secrets of the tribe, the little Picts were afraid or ashamed to show them all the roads across the heather. I had this from a Pict prisoner. They were as much our spies as our enemies, for the winged hats oppressed them, and they took their winter stores. Ah, foolish little people. Then the winged hats began to roll us up from each end of the wall. I sent runners southward to see what the news might be in Britain, but the wolves were very bold that winter among the deserted stations where the troops had once been, and none came back. We had trouble too with the forage for the ponies along the wall. I kept 10, and so did Pertinax. We lived and slept in the saddle, riding east or west, and we ate our worn-out ponies' meat. You eat what you can to survive. The people of the town also made us some trouble till I gathered them all in one quarter behind Hunno. We broke down the wall on either side of it to make, as it were, a citadel. Our men fought better in close order. By the end of the second month we were deep in the war as a man is deep in a snowdrift or in a dream. I think we fought in our sleep. At least I know I have gone to the wall and come off again, remembering nothing between, though my throat was harsh with giving orders, and my sword, I could see, had been used. The winged hats fought like wolves, all in a pack. Where they had suffered most, there they charged in most hotly. This was hard for the defenders, but it held them from sweeping on into Britain. In those days, Pertinax and I wrote on the plaster of the bricked archway into Valencia the names of the towers and the days on which they fell one by one. We wished for some record. And the fighting? The fight was always hottest to left and right of the great statue of Roma Dea, near to Rutilianus's house. By the light of the sun, that fat old man whom we had not considered at all grew young again among the trumpets. I remember he said his sword was an oracle. Let us consult the oracle, he would say, and put the handle against his ear and shake his head wisely. And this day is allowed Rutilianus to live, he would say, and tucking up his cloak he would puff and pant and fight well. Oh, there were jests and plenty on the wall to take the place of food. We endured for 2 months and 17 days, always being pressed from 3 sides into a smaller space. So from each side and from the north. Several times Allo sent in word that help was at hand. We did not believe it, but it cheered our men. The end came not with shootings of joy, but like the rest, as in a dream. The winged hats suddenly left us in peace for one night, and the next day, which is too long for spent men. We slept at first lightly, expecting to be roused, and then like logs, each where he lay. May you never need such sleep. When I waked, our towers were full of strange armed men who watched us snoring. I roused Pertinax, and we leapt up together. What? Said a young man in clean armour. Do you fight against Theodosius? Look. North we looked over the red snow. No winged hats were there. South we looked over the white snow, and behold, there were the eagles of 2 strong legions encamped. East and west we saw flame and fighting, but by Hunno all was still. Trouble no more, said the young man. Rome's arm is long. Where are the captains of the wall? We said we were those men. But you are old and grey-haired, he cried. Maximus said they were boys. Yes, that was true some years ago, said Pertinax. What is our fate to be, you fine and well-fed child? I am called Ambrosius, a secretary of the emperor, he answered. Show me a certain letter which Maximus wrote from a tent at Aquileia, and perhaps I will believe. I took it from my breast, and when he had read it, he saluted us, saying, "Your fate is in your own hands. If you choose to serve Theodosius, he will give you a legion. If it suits you to go to your homes, we will give you a triumph. I would like better a bath, wine, food, razors, soaps, oils, and scents," said Pertinax, laughing. "Oh, I see you are a boy," said Ambrosius. "And you?" turning to me. "We bear no ill will against Theodosius, but in war," I began. "In war it is as it is in love," said Pertinax. "Whether she be good or bad, one gives one's best once, to one only. That given, there remains no second worth giving or taking." "That is true," said Ambrosius. "I was with Maximus before he died. He warned Theodosius that you would never serve him, and frankly I say, I am sorry for my emperor." "He has Rome to console him," said Pertinax. "I ask you of your kindness to let us go to our homes and get this smell out of our nostrils." "None the less they gave us a triumph." "It was well earned," said Puck, throwing some leaves into the still water of the marl pit. The black, oily circles spread dizzily as the children watched them. "I want to know, oh, ever so many things," said Dan. "What happened to old Aloe? Did the winged hats ever come back? And what did Amal do? And what happened to the fat old general with the 5 cooks?" said Una. "And what did your mother say when you came home?" "She'd say you're sitting too long over this old pit, so late as 'tis already," said old Hobden's voice behind them. "Hist," he whispered. He stood still, for not 20 paces away a magnificent dog fox sat on his haunches and looked at the children as though he were an old friend of theirs. "Oh, Muss Reynolds, said Hobden under his breath. "If I knowed all was inside your head, I would know something worth knowing. Muss Dan and Muss Honor, come along o' me while I lock up my little hen-house." Reynold the fox. And that's the end of that chapter, and we have the song that comes at the end of the chapter, a Pict song, which I shall read for you. A Pict song. Rome never looks where she treads, always her heavy hooves fall on our stomachs, our hearts, or our heads, and Rome never heeds when we bawl. Her sentries pass on, that is all, and we gather behind them in hordes and plot to reconquer the wall with only our tongues for our swords. We are the little folk, we, too little to love or to hate. Leave us alone and you'll see how we can drag down the great. We are the worm in the wood, we are the rot in the root, we are the germ in the blood, we are the thorn in the foot. Mistletoe killing an oak, rats gnawing cables in two, moths making holes in a cloak. How they must love what we do. Yes, we little folk too. We are as busy as they, working our works out of view. Watch and you'll see it some day. No, indeed, we are not strong, but we know peoples that are. And yet, yes, and we'll guide them along to smash and destroy you in war. We shall be slaves just the same. Yes, we have always been slaves, but you will die of the shame, and then we shall dance on your graves. We are the little folk, etc., etc. So even though the Romans were going to be conquered at some point, and we know that from British history, and the Northmen did sweep in to the British Isles, but the Picts were never entirely put under everybody's thumb. They survived, even if as a broken, separated people. You can see if you can find out more about them. As a nation, they no longer exist, but there are people who trace their descent, people who had them as ancestors that still live. So there you go. Right, and we shall carry on with the next chapter, which starts with a new song or story. And this chapter is called Hell of the Draft. Hell o' the Draft. Hell, H-A-L, as a name, O or of the draft. And I'm reading Puck of Pook's Hill by Rudyard Kipling. Prophets have honoured all over... Let me start that. And actually, I'm not even starting yet. I haven't had my drink of water, and that's what we do in chapter breaks. So, where's yours? Go on. Top up. Make sure you rehydrate. Sorry about that. I do sometimes forget where I'm at, what I'm up to. Anyway, we shall carry on. Howl o' the Draft. Rudyard Kipling's Puck of Pook's Hill. Prophets have honour all over the earth, except in the village where they were born, where such as knew them boys from birth, nature alley hold 'em in scorn. That's the way it's written. Nature alley hold them in scorn. When prophets are naughty and young and vain, they make a wonderful grievance of it. You can see by their writings how they complain, but oh, 'tis wonderful good for the prophet. Prophet as in someone who prophesies. There's nothing Nineveh town can give, nor being swallowed by whales between, makes up for the place where a man's folk live, that don't care nothing what he has been. He might have been that, or he might have been this, but they love and they hate him for what he is. Don't know. Anyway, we are going to carry on. A rainy afternoon drove Dan and Una over to play pirates in the little mill. I've been there, the little mill at Bateman's. If you don't mind rats on the rafters and oats in your shoes, the mill attic with its trapdoors and inscriptions on beams about floods and sweethearts is a splendid place. It is lighted by a foot-square window called Duck Window that looks across to Little Linden's farm and the spot where Jack Cade was killed. I don't know, maybe that's a real person that you can look up. Jack Cade, C-A-D-E. When they had climbed the attic ladder, they call it the mainmast tree, out of the ballad of Sir Andrew Barton, and Dan swarved it with might and main, as the ballad says, they saw a man sitting on Duck Windowsill. He was dressed in a plum-coloured doublet and tight plum-coloured hose, and he drew busily in a red-edged book. Sit ye, Puck cried from a rafter overhead. See what it is to be beautiful. Sir Harry Daw, Hal, says I am the very image of a head for a gargoyle. So we've finished with the Roman period in the storytelling, by the sound of it, and we're now on to something else. We'll find out what. The man laughed and raised his dark velvet cap to the children, and his grizzled hair bristled out in a stormy fringe. He was old, 40 at least, considered old in those days. But his eyes were young, with funny little wrinkles all round them. A satchel of embroidered leather hung from his broad belt, which looked interesting. May we see, said Una, coming forward. Surely, he said, moving up on the window seat, and returned to his work with a silver-pointed pencil. Puck sat as though the grin were fixed for ever on his broad face, while they watched the quick, certain fingers that copied it. Presently the man took a reed pen from his satchel and trimmed it with a little ivory knife carved in the semblance of a fish. Oh, what a beauty, said Dan at the knife. Where fingers, that blade is perilous sharp. I made it myself of the best low country crossbow steel. So it's ivory covered with a steel blade. That's why it's an ivory knife, just in case you were wondering. I don't think you use ivory as anything but a paper knife. Where fingers, that blade is perilous sharp. I made it myself of the best low country crossbow steel. And so too this fish. When his back fin travels to his tail, so he swallows up the blade, even as the whale swallowed Gaffer Jonah. Yes, and that's my inkhorn. I made the 4 silver saints round it. Press Barnabas's head, it opens. And then he dipped the trimmed pen and with careful boldness began to put in the essential lines of Puck's rugged face that had been but faintly revealed by the silver point. The children gasped, for it fairly leapt from the page. As he worked and the rain fell on the tiles, he talked, now clearly, now muttering, now breaking off to frown or smile at his work. He told them he was born at Little Linden's farm, and his father used to beat him for drawing things instead of doing things, till an old priest called Father Roger, who drew illuminated letters in rich people's books, coaxed the parents to let him take the boy as a sort of painter's apprentice. Then he went with Father Roger to Oxford, where he cleaned plates and carried cloaks and shoes for the scholars of a college called Merton, which is a real place, from what I remember, and it's still there. Didn't you hate that? Said Dan after a great many other questions. I never thought on it. Half Oxford was building new colleges or beautifying the old, and she had called to her aid the master craftsmen of all Christendom, kings in their trade and honoured of kings. I knew them. I worked for them. That was enough. No wonder. He stopped and laughed. You became a great man, Hal, said Puck. They said so, Robin. Even Bramante said so. Why? What did you do? Dan asked. The artist looked at him queerly. Things in stone and such, up and down England. You would not have heard of 'em. To come nearer home, I rebuilt this little Barnabas church of ours. It cost me more trouble and sorrow than aught I've touched in my life, but 'twas a sound lesson. Said Dan, we've had lessons this morning. In other words, you're going to give us more lessons now, really, please? This is meant to be our time off. I'll not afflict ye, lads, said Hal, while Puck roared. Only 'tis strange to think how that little church was rebuilt, re-roofed, and made glorious, thanks to some few godly Sussex ironmasters, a Bristow sailor lad, a proud ass called Hal o' the Draught, because, d'ye see, he was always drawing and drafting, and, he dragged the words slowly, and a Scotch pirate. Pirate, said Dan. He wriggled like a hooked fish. Even that Andrew Barton you were singing of on the stair just now. He dipped again in the inkwell and held his breath over a sweeping line, as though he had forgotten everything else. Pirates don't build churches, do they? Said Dan. Or do they? They help mightily, Hal laughed. But you were at your lessons this morn, Jack Scholar. Oh, pirates aren't lessons. It was only Bruce and his silly old spider, said Una. Why did Sir Andrew Barton help you? I question if he ever knew it, said Hal, twinkling. Robin, how in mischief's name am I to tell these innocents what comes of sinful pride? Robin is the name he uses for Puck, in case you hadn't figured that one out. Oh, we know all about that, said Una pertly. If you get too beany, that's cheeky, you get sat upon, of course. Hal considered a moment, pen in the air, and Puck said some long words. Aha, that was my case too, he cried. Beanie, you say, but certainly I did not conduct myself well. I was proud of such things as porches, a Galilee porch at Lincoln for choice, proud of one Torrigiano's arm on my shoulder, proud of my knighthood when I made the gilt scroll work for the sovereign, our king's ship. But Father Roger, sitting in Merton College Library, he did not forget me. At the top of my pride, when I and no other should have builded the church at Lincoln, he laid it on me with a terrible forefinger to go back to my Sussex clays and rebuild at my own charges, in other words, at my own expense, my own church where us doors have been buried for 6 generations. Out, son of my art, said he, fight the devil at home ere you call yourself a man and a craftsman. And I quaked, and I went. How's yon, Robin? He flourished the finished sketch before Puck. So, the master, Father Roger, didn't want him getting proud and doing a big commission. He wanted him to go home and do something at his own cost, and where he wouldn't necessarily be appreciated or his work be appreciated, just to help keep his ego in check by the sound of it. We'll find out, shall we? Me! He flourished in the finished sketch before Puck. Me past peradventure, said Puck, smirking like a man at a mirror. Ah, see, the rain has took off. I hate housen in daylight, being stuck in a house. Whoop! Holiday! Cried Hal, leaping up. Who's for my little lindens? We can talk there. They tumbled downstairs and turned past the dripping windows of the sunny mill dam. They tumbled downstairs and turned past the dripping willows by the sunny mill dam. I wonder if that's actually the church he's talking about is actually one that's on the map in real life. Body o' me, said Hal, staring at the hop garden where the hops were just ready to blossom. What are these? Vines? No, not vines, and they twine the wrong way to beans. He began to draw in his ready book. Hops, new since your day, said Puck. They're an herb from Mars, and their flowers dried flavour ale. Mars, the god Mars. Drink, god of drink, probably. We say turkeys, heresy, hops and beer came into England all in 1 year. Heresy I know, I've seen hops, God be praised for their beauty. What is your turkis? Turkeys. The children laughed. They knew the Linden's turkeys, and as soon as they reached Linden's orchard on the hill, the full flock charged at them. Out came Hal's book at once. Hoity-toity, he cried, here's pride in purple feathers, here's wrathy contempt and the pomps of the flesh. How did you call them? Turkeys, turkeys, the children shouted, as the old gobbler raved and flamed against Hal's plum-coloured hose. Save your magnificence, he said, I've drafted 2 good new things today, and he doffed his cap to the bubbling bird. Then they walked through the grass to the knoll where little Linden's stands, the old farmhouse, weather-tiled to the old farmhouse, weather-tiled to the ground, took almost the colour of a blood ruby in the afternoon light. The pigeons pecked at the mortar in the chimney stacks. The bees that had lived under the tile since it was built filled the hot August air with their booming, and the smell of the box tree by the dairy window mixed with the smell of earth after rain, bread after baking, and a tickle of wood smoke. The farmer's wife came to the door, baby on arm, shaded her brows against the sun. Sorry, I'm just trying to copy something at the same time as reading. It's not working very well. I should really just do one thing at a time, shouldn't I? The farmer's wife came to the door, baby on arm, shaded her brows against the sun, stooped to pluck a sprig of rosemary, and turned down the orchard. The old spaniel in his barrel, that's being used as obviously as a doghouse, barked once or twice to show he was in charge of the empty house. Puck clicked back the garden gate. Do you marvel that I love it? Said Hal in a whisper. What can townfolk know of the nature of housen or land? They perched themselves a row on the old hacked oak bench in Linden's garden, looking across the valley of the brook at the fern-covered dimples and hollows of the forge behind Hobden's cottage. The old man was, turning a page, cutting a faggot in his garden by the hives. A faggot in those days was a certain amount of wood stacked up together, all the same length. There you go. It was a bundle. It was quite a second after his chopper fell that the chump of the blow reached their lazy ears. So that's the distance. Yeah, said Hal. I mind where that old gaffer stands was Nether Forge. Master John Collins's foundry. Many a night has his big trip hammer shook me in my bed here. Boom bitty, boom bitty. If the wind was east, I could hear Master Tom Collins's forge at Stockens answering his brother. Boom up, and midway between them Sir John Pelham's sledgehammers at Brightling would strike in like a pack of scholars. Hick, hack, hock, they'd say, hick, hack, hock, till I fell asleep. Yes, the valley was as full of forges and fineries as a May shore of cuckoos, all gone to grass now. Now, just a forge. A forge is a place where a smithy is not the same as a forge. A forge is where you pour molten metal into a form and you also hammer it to shape once you've actually done your work with it. And that's what the drop hammers are for. And they use the power of the water, of the stream, to turn a mill wheel. But instead of being to grind corn or to pump water, it drives drop hammers. And so you have a big long shaft which has bits that poke out on it at different places, and the shaft of this great big weight that is the drop hammer comes back towards the shaft that comes from the mill wheel, and when the mill wheel goes round with this piece poking out on it, it picks up the other end of the hammer, and then as it goes past, it drops it and it goes thunk, with all of the weight of that hammer dropping down onto what's below it. And it shakes all the ground beneath you and further out. And also you can hear it. We've actually been to is it on the edge of Dartmoor? We visited years and years ago. We visited a place where they had restored an old mill-driven drop hammer forge, a forge that had a drop hammer. And they had it running, but they had it running at a short length, not the full lever arm of the hammer, because that would have actually been, it would have shaken the building it was in, because now the building is so old, it would have shaken it apart, as well as the houses in the village surrounding it, because they're also old buildings. Whereas once upon a time when they were all new, they were strong enough to cope with it. But now when they run it at a very short length, so it's not dropping so far, so it doesn't hit as hard and shake the ground and the buildings around it as much, because otherwise it's causing a problem for all of the buildings. And so that's what they've done, is they've actually made sure that it's still safe for the old buildings. But they would rather it was still working, but not as strongly, so that you can see how it works. So there you go. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. So that's the a drop hammer at a forge. And that's the noises he's talking about. The boom, boom-bitty, and the boom, boom, just the echo of the sound and the feel of it around. Anyways, till I fell asleep. Yes, the valley was as full of forges and fineries as, that's a refinery, the finery, as a May shore cuckoos, all gone to grass now. What did they make? Said Dan. Guns for the king's ship, and for others, serpentines and cannon mostly. When the guns were cast, down would come the king's officers and take our plough oxen to haul them to the coast. Look, here's one of the first and finest craftsmen of the sea. He fluttered back a page of his book and showed them a young man's head. Underneath was written Sebastianus. He came down with a king's order on Master John Collins for 20 serpentines, wicked little cannon they be, to furnish a venture of ships. So a serpentine is actually a particular size and style of gun back then, cannon back then. And you can look them up, serpentine. To furnish a venture of ships. I drafted him thus, sitting by our fire, telling mother of the new lands he'd find the far side of the world. And he found them too. There's a nose to cleave through unknown seas. There's someone who goes off looking for something different. Cabot was his name, a Bristol lad, half a foreigner. I set a heap by him. He helped me to my church building. I thought that was Sir Andrew Barton, said Dan. Aye, but foundations before roofs. Hal answered, Sebastian first put me in the way of it. I had come down here not to serve God as a craftsman should, but to show my people how great a craftsman I was. They cared not, and it served me right. One split straw for my craft, or my great... They cared not, and it served me right. One split straw for my craft or my greatness. They didn't care a fig. What a murrain call had I, they said, to mell with old St. Barnabas. Ruinous the church had been since the Black Death, and ruinous she would remain, and I could hang myself in my new scaffold ropes. Gentle and simple, high and low, the Hayes, the Fowles, the Fenners, the Collinses, they were all in a tale against me. Only Sir John Pelham up yonder at Brightling bade me heart up and go on. Yet how could I? Did I ask Master Collins for his timber tug to haul beams? The oxen had gone to Lewis after lime. Did he promise me a set of iron cramps or ties for the roof? They never came to hand, or else they were spalty or cracked. So with everything. Nothing said but naught done, except I stood by them, and then done amiss. I thought the countryside was fair bewitched. Not till Sebastian came, the countryside was fair bewitched. It was, surely, said Puck, knees under chin. Did you ever speak, airy one? Not till Sebastian came for his guns, and John Collins played him the same dog's tricks as he'd played with me. as he'd played me with my ironwork. Week in, week out, 2 or 3 serpentines would be flawed in the casting, and only fit, they said, to be remelted. Then John Collins would shake his head and vow he could pass no cannon for the king's service that were not perfect. Saints, how Sebastian stormed! I know, for we sat on this bench sharing our sorrows into common. Shared sorrows, the same problems. When Sebastian had fumed away 6 weeks at Linden's and gotten just 6 serpentines, Dirk Brenzett, master of the signet, Hoy, sends me word that the block of stone he was fetching me from France for our new font he'd hove overboard to lighten his ship, chased by Andrew Barton up to Rye Port. "Ah, the pirate," said Dan. "Yes, and while I am tearing my hair over this, Ticehurst Will, my best mason, comes to me shaking and vowing that the devil, horned, tailed, and chained, has run out on him from the church tower, and the men would work there no more. So I took him off the foundations, which we were strengthening, and went into the Bell Tavern for a cup of ale. Says Master John Collins, "Have it your own way, lad, but if I was you, I'd take the signification of the sign and leave old Barnabas Church alone." And they all wagged their sinful heads and agreed, less afraid of the devil than of me, as I saw later. When I brought my sweet news to Linden's, Sebastian was lime-washing the kitchen beams for Mother. He loved her like a son. "Cheer up, lad," he says. "God's where he was. Only you and I chanced to be pure pute asses." Not quite sure. "We've been tricked, Hal, and more shame to me, a sailor, that I did not guess it before. More shame to me, a sailor, that I did not guess it before. You must leave your belfry alone, forsooth, because the devil is adrift there, and I cannot get my serpentines, because John Collins cannot cast them aright. Meantime, Andrew Barton hawks off the port of Rye. And why? To take those very serpentines which poor Cabot must whistle for. The said serpentines, I'll wager my share of new continents, being now hid away in St. Barnabas Church Tower, clear as the Irish coast at noonday." "They'd sure never dare to do it," I said. "And for another thing, selling cannon to the king's enemies is black treason, hanging and fine." "It is sure large profit. Men'll dare any gallows for that. I've been a trader myself," says he. "We must be upsides with him for the honour of Bristol." Then he hatched a plot. Sitting on the lime-wash bucket, we gave out to ride on Tuesday to London, and made a show of taking farewells of our friends, especially of Master John Collins. But at Wadhurst Woods we turned, rode home to the water meadows, hid our horses in a willow tot at the foot of the glebe, and come night stole tiptoe uphill to Barnabas's church again. A thick mist and a moon striking through. I had no sooner locked the tower door behind us than over goes Sebastian, full length, in the dark. "Pest," he says, "step high and feel low, Hal. I've stumbled over guns before." Sebastian recognises them when he falls over them. I groped, and one by one the tower was pitchy dark. I counted the leather barrels of 20 serpentines laid out on pease straw. No conceal at all. "There's 2 demi-cannon my end," says Sebastian, slapping metal. "They'll be for Andrew Barton's lower deck. Honest, honest John Collins. So this is his warehouse, his arsenal, his armoury. Now see you why your pokings and pryings have raised the devil in Sussex. You've hindered John's lawful trade for months." And he laughed where he lay. A clay-cold tower is no fireside at midnight, so we climbed the belfry stairs, and there Sebastian trips over a cowhide with its horns and tail. "Aha! Your devil has left his doublet. Does it become me, Hal?" He draws it on and capers in the shafts of window moonlight. Wonderful devilish-like. Then he sits on the stairs, rapping with his tail on a board, and his back aspect was dreader than his front, and a howlet lit in and screeched at the horns of him. I think that's a young owl, an owlet, a howlet. "If you'd keep out the devil, shut the door," he whispered. And that's another false proverb, Hal, for I can hear your tower door opening. I locked it. "Who a plague has another key then?" I said. All the congregation to judge by their feet, he says, and peers into the blackness. Still, Hal, hear him grunt. That's more o' my serpentines, I'll be bound. 1, 2, 3, 4 they bear in. Faith, Andrew equips himself like an admiral. 24 serpentines in all. As if it had been an echo, we heard John Collins's voice come up all hollow. 24 serpentines and 2 demi-cannon. That's the full tally for Sir Andrew Barton. Courtesy costs naught, whispers Sebastian. Shall I drop my dagger on his head? They go over to Rye of Thursday in the woolwains, hid under the wool packs. Dirk Brenzit meets them at Uddermore, as before, says John. So this is John Collins talking about how they're being shipped. Handy that. Lord, what a hand-smooth trade it is, says Sebastian. I lay we are the sole 2 babes in the village that have not our lawful share in the venture. There was a full score folk below, talking like all Robertsbridge market. We counted them by voice. Master John Collins pipes, the guns for the French carrack must lie here next month. Will, when does your young fool, me, so please you, come back from Lunnon? No odds, I heard Ticehurst Willie answer. Lay him just where you've got your mind. Master Collins, we're all too afraid of the devil to meddle with the tower now. And the long knave laughed. 'Tis easier now for you to raise the devil, Will, says another, Ralph Hobden of the Forge. Amen, roars Sebastian, and ere I could hold him, he leaps down the stairs, wonderful devilish-like, howling no bounds. He had scarce time to lay out for the nearest than they ran. Saints, how they ran! We heard them pound on the door of the Bell Tavern, and then we ran too. What's next? Says Sebastian, loping up his cow-tail as he leaped the briars. I've broke honest John's face. Ride to Sir John Pelham's, I said. He is the only one that ever stood by me. We rode to Brightling, and past Sir John's lodges, where the keepers would have shot us as for deer stealers, and we had Sir John down into his justice chair, and when we had told him our tale and showed him the cowhide, which Sebastian wore still girt about him, he laughed till the tears ran. Well, he said, I'll see justice done before daylight. What's your complaint? Master Collins is my old friend. He's none of mine, I cried, when I think how he and his likes have balked and dozened and cousined me at every turn over the church. And I choked at the thought. But you see now they needed it for another use, says he smoothly. Also they did my serpentines, Sebastian cried. I should be half across the Western Ocean by now if my guns had been ready, but they're sold to a Scotch pirate by your old friend. Where's your proof? Said Sir John, stroking his beard. I broke my shins over them not an hour since, and I heard John give order where they were to be taken, says Sebastian. Words only, said Sir John. Master Collins is somewhat of a liar at best. He carried it so gravely that for the moment I thought he was dipped in this secret traffic too, and that there was not an honest ironmaster in Sussex. Name a reason, said Sebastian, and raps with his cow-tail on the table. Whose guns are they then? Yours manifestly, said Sir John. You come with the king's order for 'em, and Master Collins casts 'em in his foundry. If he chooses to bring them up from Nether Forge and lay 'em out in the church tower, why they are in so much the nearer to the main road, and you are saved a day's hauling. What a coil to make of a mere act of neighbourly kindness, lad. I fear I have requited him very scurvily, says Sebastian, looking at his knuckles. But what of the demi-cannon? I could do with them well, but they're not in the king's order. Kindness, loving kindness, said Sir John. Questionless in his zeal for the king and his love for you, John, adds those 2 cannon as a gift. 'Tis plain as this coming daylight, ye stockfish. So it is, said Sebastian. Oh, Sir John, why did you never use the sea? You are lost ashore. And he looked on him with great love. So Sir John's given them a way around it, that John Collins is going to save face and not get into trouble, but also that Sebastian still gets his cannon. What about the pirate? I do my best in my station, Sir John strokes his beard again and rolls forth his deep drumming justice's voice thus. But suffer me, you two lads, on some midnight frolic into which I probe not, roistering around the tavern, surprise Master Collins at his, he thinks a moment, at his good deeds done by stealth. Ye surprise him, I say, cruelly. Truth, Sir John, if you had seen him run, says Sebastian. On this you ride breakneck to me with a tale of pirates and woolwains and cowhides, which, though it hath moved my mirth as a man, offendeth my reason as a magistrate. So I will e'en accompany you back to the Tower, with perhaps some few of my own people, and 3-4 wagons, and I'll be your warrant that Master John Collins will freely give you your guns and your demi-cannon, Master Sebastian. He breaks into his proper voice. I warned the old Todd and his neighbours long ago that they'd come to trouble with their side-sellings and by-dealings, but we cannot have half Sussex hanged for a little gun-running. Are ye content, lads? I'd commit any treason for two demi-cannons, said Sebastian, and rubbed his hands. Ye have just compounded with rank treason felony for the same bribe, said Sir John. Wherefore to horse and get the guns. But Master Collins meant the guns for Sir Andrew Barton all along, didn't he? Said Dan. Questionless, that he did, said Hal, but he lost them. We poured into the village on the red edge of dawn. Sir John horsed in half armour, his pennon flying, behind him 30 stout brightling knaves, 5 abreast, behind them 4 woolwains, and behind them 4 trumpets to trump over the jest, blowing, Our King went forth to Normandy. I'm guessing that's a particular tune. When we halted and rolled the ringing guns out of the tower, 'twas for all the world like Friar Roger's picture of the French siege in the Queen's Missal book. That's like a prayer book. And what did our village do? Said Dan. Oh, bore it nobly, cried Hal. Though they had tricked me, I was proud of them. They came out of their housen, looking at that little army as though it had been a post, and went their shut-mouthed way. Never a sign, never a word. They'd have perished sooner than let Brightling overcrow us. Even that villain, Ticehurst Will, coming out of the bill for his morning ale, he all but runs under Sir John's horse. Where's Sir a devil? Cries Sir John, reining back. Oh, says Will, market day is it? And all the bullocks from Brightling here. I spared him his belting for that, the brazen knave. But John Collins was our masterpiece. He happened along street, his jaw tied up where Sebastian had clouted him, when we were trundling the first demi-cannon through the lich gate. I reckon you'll find her middling heavy, he says. If you've a mind to pay, I'll loan ye my timber tug. She won't lie easy on Harry Woolwain. That was the one time I ever saw Sebastian taken flat aback. He opened and shut his mouth, fishy-like. No offence, says Master John. You've got her reasonable good cheap. I thought you might not grudge me a groat if I helped move her. Ah, he was a masterpiece. They say that morning's work cost our John £200, and he never winked an eyelid, not even when he saw the guns all carted off to Lewis. Neither then nor later, said Puck. Once. 'Twas after he gave St. Barnabas the new chime of bells. Oh, there was nothing the Collinses or the Hayes or the Fowles or the Fenners would not do for the church then. Ask and have was their song. We had rung him in, and he was in the tower with Black Nick Fowl that gave us our rood screen. The old man pinches the bell rope one hand and scratches his neck with the other. Sooner she was pulling yon clapper than my neck, he says. That was all. That was Sussex, Sealy, Sussex, for everlasting. And what happened after? Said Una. I went back to England, said Hal slowly. I'd had my lesson against pride. I went back into England, not just his little local area, said Hal slowly. I'd had my lesson against pride, but they tell me I left St. Barnabas a jewel, just about a jewel. Well a well, 'twas done for and among my own people, and Father Roger was right. I never knew such trouble or such triumph since. That's the nature of things. A dear, dear land. He dropped his chin on his chest. There's your father at the forge. What's he talking to old Hobden about? Said Puck, opening his hand with 3 leaves in it. Dan looked towards the cottage. "Oh, I know. It's that old oak lying across the brook. Pater always wants it grubbed." In the still valley they could hear old Hobden's deep tones. "Have it as you've a mind to," he was saying, "but the viver's on her roots, they hold the bank together. If you grub her out, the bank shall all come tearing down, and next floods that brook'll swarve up. But have it as you've a mind. The mistress, she sets a heap by the ferns on her trunk." "Oh, I'll think it over," said the pater. Una laughed a little bubbling chuckle. "What devil's in that belfry?" said Hal with a lazy laugh. "That should be a Hobden by his voice. Why, the oak is the regular bridge for all the rabbits between the 3 acre and our meadow. The best place for wires on the farm. Hobden says he's got 2 there now," Una answered. "He won't ever let it be grubbed." "Ah, Sussex, Sealy Sussex for everlasting," murmured Hal, and the next moment their father's voice, calling across the little Lindens, broke the spell as little Barnabas' clock struck 5. And I'm going to read a very famous poem now, which is part of our story. I was wondering when it was going to come in. A Smuggler's Song. If you wake at midnight and hear a horse's feet, don't go drawing back the blind or looking in the street. Them that asks no questions isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, me darling, while the gentlemen go by. 25 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk, laces for a lady, letters for a spy, and watch the wall, me darling, while the gentlemen go by. Running round the wood lump if you chance to find little barrows roped and tarred, all full of brandy wine. Don't you shout to come and look, nor take 'em for your play. Put the brushwood back again, and they'll be gone next day. If you see the stable door setting open wide, if you see a tired horse lying down inside, if your mother mends a coat cut about and tore, if the lining's wet and warm, don't you ask no more. I'm not going to read the chorus again, I'm just going to keep reading the verses. If you meet King George's men dressed in blue and red, you be careful what you say and mindful what is said. If they call you pretty maid and chuck you neath the chin, don't you tell where no one is, nor yet where no one's been. Knocks and footsteps round the house, whistles after dark, you've no call for running out till the house dogs bark. Trustees here and pinchers here, and see how dumb they lie. They don't fret to follow when the gentlemen go by. If you do as you've been told, likely there's a chance you'll be given a dainty doll all the way from France, with a cap of Valenciennes and a velvet hood, a present from the gentleman, along of being good. 25 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk. Them that asks no questions isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. Valenciennes is a type of lace, from what I understand. And there you go. That's the end of today's reading. And I was wondering when we were going to get the Smuggler's Song, but now we've had it. Wonderful. What a lovely little twist of Battle of Wills and how it worked out in the end. So there, that's it. Do look up Bateman's on Google Maps and see where it is. It's a house in, I think it's East Sussex or maybe Kent. I think it's East Sussex. It's a National Trust property now, so therefore it's an historic house that can be visited. I don't know about it at the moment with Corona, but COVID-19, but it is a place that you can visit. And the picture that you can see behind me of the books on the shelves and the globe just there, that's actually a photograph that's been taken in Rudyard Kipling's own study where he wrote this book. I've been there, I've had a look. The mill is still on the stream. I think they've done a little bit of repair work to it. But if you have a look round, you may actually find that there is a hill, a dominant hill to the southwest of Bateman's property, which is the one that's described as Pook's Hill. And then there's some woodland behind it that rises even further up. There's a stream that runs through the valley. See if you can find the thing that he would have referred to as Hobden's Forge. There may be something still there. There may actually be a little church nearby as well, which may be the one he's referenced here. Because a lot of authors, when they're writing, like to include real places, they just change them a bit. They like to use their imagination and say, wouldn't it be funny if this was the background to that? Rather than it being the actual history, they make up some stuff. So Rudyard Kipling, one of the things he was good at was actually writing up a little bit of history, but in such a way that it becomes interesting to us, putting words in people's mouths, but based in some of what was actually going on at the time in history. So there you go. We'll see you next time.